you?
Good. We thought it would be a really good idea to actually start a lecture series to talk about some of the things that we're interested in, some of the things that we've been doing. I think this is really a great time, to talk about a variety of topics. And people have been asking more in terms of, like, some of the concepts that we discuss, during our retreats at Kaichido and doing our seminars and everything, and to actually bring some of those concepts out to people and
Right.
to begin to share more of who we are and our philosophy and our teachings and some of the ways in which we go about thinking about things and how we, process things or interact with things. And I think we've come up with some good concepts that you and I were talking about.
Right.
So we decided to start this little series before meditation on Wednesday here at Solterra. We're in the process of working with Solterra in terms of developing the Awakened channel.
The Awaken channel.
The Awakened channel, which is really a fun project, I think, to really think about awakening and that
And what
we're
that means.
and what that means,
Right.
and just waking up and kind of coming alive and and really enjoying the beauty and the quality of life, and but from a standpoint of being awake, so I know that you had come up with some really good understandings and realizations, and we've been talking back and forth for years. So
Right. Right.
maybe what we can do is maybe start sharing a little bit about just your process and how you've been in the work. I mean, you're a Doe level instructor at Kaichido, and you've kind of gone through a lot of the seminars and the processes. So maybe just a little bit about your process, and then we can kind of open up the forum in terms of some questions and answers. And also, we want to give people an opportunity out in the community a little bit to ask some questions too when they're ready to do that. So.
Right. So basically, it's interesting because recognizing as I went through the process of awakening, which we'll discuss about what that really means, is all of a sudden realizing there's a different way of seeing the world. And for me, it was a very disruptive. Right. I mean, it was confusing a little bit, and I wasn't really sure what was going on. It was beautiful, but at the same time, I had a lot of questions that I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't have someone who I could talk to, right? Charles was around at the time, and I was just going through I just had a lot of questions, and I didn't have the answers to, or a community that I could go to. Right? So which is great when I found Kaichido, because all of a sudden everything that I had gone through was making sense. Like, oh, I get it now. This is this and that is that and everything, and it just made the whole process so much easier and lighter. And sometimes it can be difficult because of the changes, right? All of a sudden the change is uncomfortable. Change is always uncomfortable. Even if it's a good change, it's still uncomfortable.
Right.
And with the awakening process, you kind of recognize that you're moving past some limiting beliefs that you had before, right?
Right.
And one of the great things about this process right now that we're talking about doing is that the questions that I had and still have in terms of awakening or transitioning into a different kind of way of being, that I had all these questions, and I felt like my questions were really really eye-opening, or in a way some of them were inspired, and it was amazing how the inspired questions, when you ask the right questions, how insightful the answers can be. And so I would ask Charles questions about things that I didn't understand, and his answers were just so beautiful and so simple, no matter how strange or confusing my question might be. When he answered them so eloquently. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this, because and like your wife said, she was wanting to do this too, and it's kind of a forum to where we can ask those questions that maybe everyone has, and having someone who's so insightful, Charles so full of wisdom, and it's an opportunity for him to really be able to share that with others.
Well, one of the things I do in terms of doing anything is really just listening. And I think when I evaluate the process that I've been in terms of my own awakening is has to do with different levels of listening. It's like the deeper I listen, the clearer the responses. It's like there's a part of me that is aware of all of it. And when I get out of the way or get my sense of self or identity or who I think I am or whatever out of the way, then the messages come through. You know, they come through more clearly. But if I'm second guessing or like, is this the right answer or whatever, or is it this or that, you know, then it becomes cloudy, it becomes confusing. So what I've discovered is just by becoming a good listener, that opens up that gateway of information that's so beautiful that keeps streaming through. So my work over the years has been to really work on my listening. So my awakening process has been a process of awakening into deeper levels of listening. And because it's almost like listening to the divine, listening to God, listening to Source. And the voice gets clearer as, you know, the I begins to surrender, you know, to the one, you know, to the essence. And then the message comes through like pretty clearly. Yeah.
So, in terms of awakening, let's discuss a little bit about that, because what does that mean to you? What is your experience about what awakening means?
Yeah, for me, it's about awakening is a process of allowing the essence of who I am to manifest into physical reality. It's allowing my truth, which is my essence, which makes it possible for me to exist in each moment, to allow that to come into being. And I think the awakening is an allowing of the essence of who I am to come forth into being. And the being is really what the illumination is, the light is. So the being is, I believe, and what I've began to experience is it's always there. It's always perfect, but it's awakening is the realization of it. So it's different levels of realizing the truth of who we are.
Right.
So, you know, it's like you can feel it, like those moments, I call them bright spots.
Right.
The bright spot is really where, you know, all of a sudden we see all of it and it's all so clear.
Right.
You know, and it's like those moments of clarity, and it inspires us to take action, to interact with the world, to get out and talk about the things that we're excited about, to design new things, to discover new things, you know. So, you know, I think it's a process of waking up, but also really being a participant in the world experience.
Right.
So we're not just, you know, awareness is not enough, so to speak.
Right.
It's also beginning to participate and beginning to interact with the world, you know, and it's like there's so much opportunity, I think, in each moment for us to discover new ways to share, you know, this awakening or this aspect of ourselves that we're starting to come into alignment with.
Right, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And awakening can be different for everyone.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
their way of an awareness. You had mentioned something about awareness.
Right.
And what's the difference between awakening and awareness?
I think what awareness is where we're able to see the bigger picture. You become aware. In other words, if something is, all of a sudden you become aware that something exists, even though you don't fully understand it, or it doesn't make sense to you. Awakening is where it all comes into harmony, where it makes perfect sense.
Right.
So the awakening is where the whole paradigm comes into balance in your consciousness, and it makes perfect sense.
You see the whole process
You see
happening.
you see it, and you can see how perfect it is in the midst of everything.
But and your participation in it, like
Right.
how you are part of it
Right,
too.
and just that you start seeing how valuable you are, you know, how valuable everybody is.
Right.
You know, you start seeing everyone is so valuable in this process and that's, I think, when we awaken, we start seeing our own intrinsic value as well as the value of everyone. So everyone is valuable. You know, so we can look at things, you know, as beautiful as they are or as horrible as they are, and we start seeing how valuable it all is. as it's horribly beautiful. It's like,
right,
and it's beautifully horrible. So I mean, it's all of it. So in that, we're not rejecting anything. We're not like pushing things away and saying that's bad and whatever. But the transformation, I think, is when the light is able to shine on all of it, and then it elevates it to like another state of consciousness,
right,
or another state of awareness, ultimately culminating in awakening into a new state of being.
right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we wanted to do, because the Awaken channel is going to be more for people who are not sure what is happening, like what happened with me. And I feel it's very valuable because of my confusion and feeling lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what this channel is going to do, and what our program is, we want to be able to listen to what questions you may have. Something that want to ask, an inspired question, right? Asking the right question gets insightful answers. So kind of thinking about where you're coming from, and there's so many other people who are asking the same questions, or have the same questions but just don't know how to ask it, right? And then you in the audience, you the listeners, can ask these questions that help people grow through the answers. And Charles' answers, his answers are beautiful. They feel good. Your answers always feel good. Like they always feel right on. So, which is why I feel that this is something that, a platform, a place where everyone can have the opportunity to hear your voice.
Well, the thing is that what I've also realized is that you can't answer a question that hasn't been asked. So when you ask a question, it's like you open up a gateway in your consciousness. So this aspect of your being opens, and that applies just for you. Because you can go to a lecture, and the lecture may be talking about things that are it may generally interest you. In other words, I'm really interested in like what the lecturer has to say, but the question begins to make it more unique and personal. Like, this really applies to me. This is what I'm working on right now. This is the question that I have. Also, what I've encouraged people to do is to ask the what or the how question. I don't believe that there's any answer to why. So what is all about awareness, and how is about action. So the what question is that we need to explore, more of what it is.
Right.
Which it begins the process of waking up, is when you start the process of exploration, when you start exploring, what it is. And then once you become aware of it, then the how question is the next dimension, where we start seeing how it's functional, how it works with everything, how it fits into the overall flow of life, the mechanism of life, the mechanism of eternity, how it all fits and how it all works perfectly.
Right, and the beauty of this is within the complicated questions, it's the simplicity within it all.
Right.
Because it can be just so simple and so straightforward. Where if it's in our head, we make it more complicated. We make it more confusing. We get lost in all this whys and all these kinds of questions. But when you bring it out into a question, a simple question, you get the answers you get are just straightforward. It could just be that.
I've seen people
helpful.
Heal major traumatic experiences, traumas that you wouldn't imagine, losses, just things that have happened to them or people they love, and when they were able to let go of the why, it was like something lifted, and then they went more into a state of awareness, and then they start seeing that everything was perfect. I've had in the case usually of people losing a loved one, someone passes away, and there's no answer that anyone can give that person that's really going to make a difference at the level that's going to satisfy their heart. I think religion has tried to do it, philosophies have tried to do it, but there is a transformation that takes place when we let go of trying to struggle with that question why. Because it's like a circular question, and it has no end to it.
Right.
And then that's a part of the suffering, is that we're in this loop, and we can't get out of it, where the what is just being aware of where you're at in the moment, so that the how can be just taking care of yourself and nurturing yourself, or nurturing that part of yourself that's suffering. The part of yourself that's suffering in that moment may need just to be taken care of, may need to be just listened to or understood or validated, for how you feel. Because there's no rational, logical reason like that someone so close to you or something that was so important to you is no longer available, or it's not within range, or you don't have access to it. So I believe that the transformation takes place when we let go of that struggle and we begin to just drop into the present moment, drop into the now, and begin to listen, at a deeper level.
Right. And then the awareness and the awakening, you said transformation.
Right.
Right? So through the awareness and the awakening comes the transformation.
Beautiful transformation.
Right, exactly. That is really what you're wanting.
Right.
So it feels fulfilling. You feel
Right.
fulfilled with that.
Right.
And I love the fact that you said that about the why, because it can keep you always why and never finding an answer, but staying, not even realizing you're stuck
Right.
in the why until you ask a different question.
Right, because that's a very good point in terms of asking a different question. So it's once we find the right question and we asked it in a way that it's like liberating, like the question can liberate us from the suffering that we're in.
Right.
But it is, I think it involves investigating, it involves exploring and asking. Because I think if we just sit and wait without asking the question, that prevents us from doing the level of exploration or exploring, the possibilities of just, the awareness. Like, okay, I'm seeing it from a way I haven't even seen it before.
Right, and exploring the possibilities.
And exploring
And that's, I think, part of what we're doing here with
Right.
the questions and
Right.
the answers, is exploring possibilities and helping people see a more expanded way of being.
Right. So that's what we like to do each week, is that we'd like to provide this as a forum for people to come on, and we'll be recording live, and we'll open it up for dialogue. We also would like people, if you would, to make a list of questions, things that you're working on, because sometimes we can come in with an agenda, and say, well, this is what we're going to talk about. A lot of, presenters and shows and processes kind of come in with an agenda, and it may have nothing to do with what you're interested in. So, I think by asking questions, the question begins to open up something that's unique to you, in terms of what you're really wanting and what's important to you, because that's how we've interacted, is that you've had questions, and and then we were able to explore the questions, and then it's opened up possibilities to see things in ways we haven't seen them before.
Right, and then having more questions that are
Right.
just, it takes you different levels. And so it's really great, this opportunity for everyone to be part of this and asking the right questions. So bringing in your questions so that we can explore and expand, and you can help others to take that exploring and expanding to a new, different level.
Yeah, because what we find out is that in essence, we're all dealing with very similar things.
Yeah.
So when someone asks a question, it's probably something that someone else is already, wondering about. I've gone to a lot of seminars and retreats over the years, and as we're sitting there and people are asking questions, it's like, oh yeah, that's answered, like what we were, working on, my wife and I, when we would go to these seminars. It was like, wow, that's our question, and it's being answered even before we get up to ask our question. It's already been answered in many different ways, so it just kind of helps us to continue to grow and maybe see it in ways we haven't seen it before. So yeah,
So this is great. Yeah, so this should be fun. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, this is the
And
beginning.
this is just going to morph into what it's supposed to be. We're really excited to kind of have you as be part of our experience and part of our communication on a weekly basis.
Yeah, we'd like to do this weekly. I think first we'll do this interaction, this question and answer, and maybe it'll center around certain teachings or certain topics that may come up. We had talked a little bit about existentialism in terms of what that is, and kind of really, it's the the whole question of like, who am I? What is the
Right.
purpose of this life?
The first questions.
Yes,
The first questions, right?
Yeah.
The big questions.
Yeah, the big questions. And I think if we haven't really come up with an answer that's satisfying in terms of the meaning of our existence, or the quality of our life and what that really means, how do we really achieve quality? What is quality of life? What is the significance of being in this time period right now and everything that's going on, and in this particular time period, how we define ourselves in relationship to each other, and how do we define ourselves in relationship to Source or God? How do we define ourselves in relationship, just to our own inner connection? So, it's beginning to grapple, I think, and beginning to basically dance in the moment and really enjoy exploring some of these questions. But I think the more the questions are geared towards the truth of what it is that we're dealing with, the more we're able to find opportunities, for liberation and, for awakening and for a sense of freedom. So yeah.
So I don't know if in terms of our forum and how we're putting out, how we're asking you guys to put out questions.
Yeah,
What-
so basically right now, just on this particular feed, if you have a list of questions or topics or things that you would like to cover, everyone that sees this and gets this, and we'll distribute it around through the networks, so that when we do come on, we'll review some of the responses that we got this evening from just putting the broadcast out, and we will also begin to consider some of the questions that you may have, or things that are going on with you that you would like to discover and like to process with us. So again, thank you, and Tamara, thank you for
No, thank you.
coming on and being a part of this,
Yes,
with
I'm loving it.
with me in this little segment. And right after this, we have our guided meditation, so we'll be setting up for our sacred sanctuary meditation, which will be broadcasting pretty soon. So if you'd like to stick around, in probably another 10 or 15 minutes, we'll be getting set up and getting ready to broadcast our sacred sanctuary meditation.
That's great. And one more thing I just want
Good.
to say about the Awaken channel. This is going to be a process. The Sacred Sanctuary is also going to be a part of this, and there's all kinds of different modes. There are going to be different programs, astrology, talking with your angels, a lot of different methods of translating information or understanding, experiencing spirituality, what that even means. There's just a lot of answers to questions in different ways. So we're looking forward to bringing that to you when we go live with that. So
Awesome.
thank you very much.
Be blessed. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk soon. Take care.